Poor in Spirit, a reflection for the 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. The handful of verses from Psalm 146, selected for the responsorial psalm this Sunday, make a clear connection with the first reading and gospel. The fatherless and the widow he sustains reminds us immediately of the widow who offers the last of her food to Elijah, only to see it replenished day after day. But the way of the wicked he thwarts looks forward in the liturgy to the warning Jesus issues concerning the scribes, who devour the houses of widows and as a pretext recite lengthy prayers. Here we find worship tested by justice. In this case, the lengthy prayers of the scribes fail to excuse their unjust demands on the meager resources of the widows. The rest of the verses we hear sound like a summary of the MO of Jesus. In his life and ministry, he clearly aligns his actions with the long tradition of biblical justice and jubilee spelled out in Psalm 146. The Lord secures justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, sets captives free, gives sight to the blind, raises up those who were bowed down, and so on. The first section of Psalm 146, not included in the response this Sunday, puts these verses in an interesting context. Do not put your trust in princes, in mortals, in whom there is no help. When their breath departs, they return to the earth. On that very day their plans perish. Happy are those whose help is in the God of Jacob, whose hope is in the Lord their God. Since happy and blessed are so often used interchangeably in the Scriptures, this passage harks back to the Beatitudes we hear on the Solemnity of All Saints. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Materially poor or not, the poor in spirit recognize their dependence upon God and put all their hope in Him. They find their place in the reign of God much more easily than the rich, the talented, the powerful, the capable, who may be tempted to forget the origin of their strength and fall into self-reliance. Which brings us to the widow in today's gospel. Like Elijah's generous host in the first reading, she offers all that she has, her whole livelihood, to meet her religious obligations as set by the scribes. Both materially poor and poor in spirit, she risks everything, entrusting her very life to the one with a long history of commitment to the poor and powerless. In Mark's Gospel, this episode passes without further comment. We do not hear what happens to the widow, now totally deprived of resources, whether a male relative steps up to meet his cultural obligation, or a wealthy patron takes up her cause, or Jesus himself arranges for her care, as he does for his own mother standing at the foot of the cross in the Gospel of John. The story simply moves on to Jesus' prediction of the fall of the temple. This immediate shift signals the cutting edge of the story, that the whole religious system built up around the temple has failed in its true purpose of mediating right relationship between the people and God. Corruption has crept in among the religious authorities. The people have suffered, and the consequences: collapse of the system destruction of the temple loom just over the horizon. Now we understand better the context of the letter to the Hebrews, from which we have read for several Sundays in a row. Written after the Roman demolition of the temple in 70 AD, with the searing clarity of hindsight, Hebrews sees Jesus Christ, crucified, raised from the dead, and ascended to the Father as the ultimate high priest, offering his once-for-all sacrifice in the heavenly sanctuary on behalf of all those whose humanity he has shared and redeemed.